Hello, everyone. A hearty welcome to Thinking Logically and Musically. Today, we are going to discuss Johann Sebastian Bach's Chaconne or Chaconne for violin solo, and in doing so, we shall be exploring an important aspect of the genre of theme and variations. A theme and its variations can be said to be a core and its derivatives. And needless to say, there's always a connection between the core and a derivative, as well as between one derivative and another. Sounds obvious. Yet, according to how Chaconne is actually played, we may or may not be fully aware of what connects the core and its derivatives, or how one element is presented and then developed into a different element so as to form a continuous integrated unity. So, in this video, I would like to present a few issues to discuss, which seem to be of crucial importance in recognizing this majestic piece as a composite yet integrated unity. So let's start with the theme. Here I would like to focus on the harmonic sequence and rhythmic pattern of the theme. Why? Because these are the fundamental elements that form the core of the piece, and that the subsequent variations are going to be derived from. First, I would like to talk about the rhythm. We have this rhythmic figure which appears throughout the piece and forms the basic rhythmic pattern of the piece. This rhythmic figure provides a connection between the theme and its variations. And now I would like to raise a question. This rhythmic figure, made up of a dotted crotchet, a quaver, and a crotchet, is often altered to a double dotted crotchet, a semiquaver, and a crotchet. You can find a good reason for doing so when, for instance, you refer to historical documentation. And indeed, this may be the way Bach wanted it to be played. However, from the viewpoint of core and derivation, we probably should also think about how this rhythmic figure is handed over from the theme to its variations to form a connection between them. For instance, let's have a look at the D major section in the middle of the piece. Here, what forms the connection between the theme at the beginning and this variation in D major quite distant from the theme is primarily the rhythm. This rhythmic figure appears repeatedly. The harmony is quite different from the theme, so it cannot be the connection. Although the register is similar, the texture is quite different, so the how shall I say, the tonal quality cannot form an adequate bond. So we need the rhythm to connect the theme and this variation. And from places like these, we should be aware that dotted crotchet and quaver cannot be replaced with a double dotted crotchet and semiquaver. I think you can agree that the rhythm plays a very important role here, and actually it also does so in the final D minor section. Here too, in a situation where it is difficult to find a harmonic connection to what happened before, the rhythm provides a strong bond. And actually, Bach extracts a fragment from the original figure that is a quaver and a dotted quaver, and uses it repeatedly. This forms a strong rhythmic connection to the past. So places like this also tell us how important this rhythmic figure is, and specifically how the quaver is to be played. Now, let's go back to the theme. When thinking about how the theme should be played rhythmically, having a broad view over the entire piece to see the value of this rhythmic figure within the overall musical context of the piece should be very, very important. Perhaps as important as being historically informed. And this is, I think, good example of the importance of thinking logically musically, not only historically. Right. Now, let's have a look at the harmony. It has a simple harmonic sequence. We may want to segment the sequence into 2 or 3 sections, depending on how we interpret the relation between the chords. But it should be reasonable to think that the submedian, or the B flat major in the D minor, functions as a slight deviation from the first 4 chords. One could say the straightforward declaration by the first 4 chords is questioned by the submedian. In fact, even the melodic line changes from an ascent to a descent. I personally would like to segment this harmonic sequence into 3 parts. Let's say a declaration, question, and a resolution. But this is highly personal, and different individuals may associate the harmonic sequence with different concepts. The important thing is to recognize the harmonic value of the theme, or the core, from which a diversity of concepts are going to be derived. And as we shall see later, this questioning function represented by the submedian in the theme, which makes the otherwise unambiguous harmonic sequence ambiguous or shadowed, will allow our chaconne to diverge in different ways and directions. Chaconne has a very rich, diverse content, and in my opinion, the submedian in the theme plays a very important role in realizing that richness and diversity. All right, now that we have some knowledge about what's happening in the theme, let's look at the few variations. People have different opinions on where the first variation starts. Some say here, where it is indicated now in the score. Others say it's 4 bars later. For now, let's leave that question open and focus on the fact that Bach repeats more than half of the theme and introduces new elements towards the end. A passionate supertonic chord over a wide register and a correspondingly passionate demi-semi-quaver or 30-second note based rhythmic figure, which together anticipate the character of the following second variation. With this chaconne and perhaps the genre of theme and variations in general, it is important to understand what remains unchanged or equivalent and what is changed or altered and how from one set of concept to another to understand the evolution. Now, let's move on to the next couple of variations. We immediately recognize the rhythmic connection to the preceding variation. This active rhythmic figure allows the second and third variations to be more active rhythmically, the variations having a new rhythmic pattern, namely dotted quaver and a semiquaver. This is probably a diminution of the dotted crotchet and quaver in the theme. Now, the dotted crotchet and quaver undergo diminution to form the dotted quaver and semiquaver, so technically there's a good connection, but psychologically it is quite difficult to recognize the connection between the unhurried former and the rather hasting latter. So it is necessary to keep something more recognizable unchanged from the theme. And it may be for this purpose that not only the harmony, but the actual notes in the chords are kept the same as or very similar to the theme. Look. And there's one more very important link to the theme, that is the function of the submedian. The powerful quadruple chords enclosed here in blue, green and yellow, and played over 4 strings are followed by a softer triple chord marked purple that is played over 3 strings. If you play the violin, you know that playing a quadruple chord involves more physical effort than playing a triple chord. In the second variation, the questioning function of the submedian is presented with a very similar nuance to the theme. So we can say that the harmony, the notes constituting the chords, and the way the harmonic functions are expressed all remain substantially unchanged from the theme. All right, let's have a look at the fourth and fifth variations. Here, the ascending scale provides a connection to the preceding variation. And more importantly, the dotted quaver plus semiquaver pattern and the dotted quaver plus 2 demi-semiquaver pattern provide a strong bond to the past. It is important to emphasize the rhythmic connection because there will be a significant change in the harmony. That is, for the first time in this piece, we experience a chromatic descent in the bass line. This harmonic sequence is quite dissimilar to what we've experienced so far. Let us have a closer look. Above indicated is the structure of the theme, and harmonically, the first, second, and third variations have the same structure. The harmonic interrelation between the chords with the intervention of the submedian in the middle clearly presents what I called declaration, question, and resolution. This 3-part structure is no longer present in the fourth variation. With the constant chromatic decline in the bass line, we do not have a clearly separable declaration and question. So rather than having 3 parts, we have 2 parts. Although the resolution is well recognizable, I may call the first part a questioned declaration. You may call it differently. The reason I called it so is because it starts with the tonic and with the ascending scale and active rhythm has a declarative quality to it, yet the chromatic decline underneath gives it a more questioning, pessimistic character. Let's also pay attention to the disproportionate distribution of positive and negative tendencies. You may want to say active or passive or Apollonian and Dionysian, etc. The choice is yours. In the theme, the declaration and the resolution can be set to constitute a positive concept, with the question constituting a negative concept, and the positive concept makes up more than half of the theme. In the fourth variation, on the other hand, the questioned declaration with a negative inclination can be set to make up about 75% of the variation, ruling over the positive. One might want to say that in this predominantly negative trend, we can sense the tragic nature of the Chaconne. Let me point out one more important aspect of the fourth variation. This continuous descent also has a potentiality to allow for more freedom in vertical motion in some of the later variations, and to some extent, free vertical motion from the concept of the initial harmonic sequence. For example, we have something like this later, where two downward streams in the higher register and lower register provide an overall declining tide to the piece. From this, derived is this, where the harmonic functions are related to, but already quite distorted from the theme and past variations. In the first three bars, C sharp is absent, the note which establishes the concept of the dominant. Then later, we have something like this, where chromatism and the vertical motion are combined, and the harmony is already quite distorted from the theme. We are, of course, still in D minor, but we are ready to move away. And this variation is followed by this variation here, with all these scales going up and down. The second bar is in A minor, which provides a good transition to higher register, but is rather extraneous to the original harmonic frame of the piece. Then later, we have this ascent, where the top line moves chromatically upward. This ascent is then turns into a chromatic descent, and wonderfully, it arrives at the wrong key, D major. So you see how the chromatic descent first distorted the rules in the fourth variation, and step by step it gave freedom to vertical motion, and this gave the whole piece a degree of freedom to prioritize vertical motion or chromatism over harmonic sequence. But this has to be done step by step, because a sudden diversion will destroy the bond between the past and present or future. And here I should like to raise an issue. Well, let's go back to the fourth and fifth variations. These variations are often played in a significantly different mood from the preceding variations and the theme. They may be played much more quietly, or the characteristic rhythmic patterns may be softened, sometimes even by connecting some notes by an unwritten legato, or the tempo may be slowed down. In this way, the performer probably tries to emphasize the difference to what happened before, to bring out the individual quality of the fourth and fifth variations. Of course, it is important to be aware of and emphasize the difference. But when doing so, we should also know what connects these variations to the past in order to maintain the continuity and integrity of the piece as a whole. As I said before, at least the ascending scale and active rhythm are, how should I say, inherited from the preceding variations. Now, I have talked quite much about the first few variations, which present the fundamental material both harmonically and rhythmically, on the basis of which all following variations are going to be developed. And I shall try to present my thoughts with fewer words for what is coming next. Let us move on. The sixth and seventh variations with an improvisatory character have little rhythmic connection, but a strong harmonic connection to what we have heard so far. The harmonic sequence they follow is substantially the same as that of the theme. Let me now skip the eighth variation. I shall come back later. The ninth variation presents something quite extraordinary. So far, the piece has been basically in triple meter. Here, if we follow the harmony and articulation of bowing, we can see that semiquavers are grouped in units of two crotchets. We could say that the triple meter is shortened to double, which gives music propulsion and fluidity, and anticipates the introduction of fluid upward and downward movements, namely scales, in the following variations. In breaking the triple meter, the secondary dominant plays an important role, breaking the routine harmonic sequence and orienting the music in a different direction. The secondary dominant was first presented in the fifth variation, but in a different context at the end of the variation. The secondary dominant is a somewhat alien chord, and before being introduced in an unprecedented way in the ninth variation, it is presented or suggested a couple of times in earlier variations. So when we first encounter the secondary dominant in the fifth variation, we should probably think of what role this harmonic function is going to play in the subsequent variations. I personally think the alien quality of the secondary dominant should be emphasized in some way so as to be distinguishable from the other chords, particularly in the ninth variation. The propulsion and fluidity provided by the ninth variation liberates us from a strict sense of meter, giving us freedom to move even against the bar lines. The harmonic diversion allows us to move slightly away from the original harmonic sequence in the following variations. Look at the 10th and 11th variations. The meter sounds triple, but doubtfully so, with considerable attention being drawn to the subdominant G minor. This corresponds to the questioning nuance in the theme, but the G minor here, being prepared with its dominant D major, is given more than a mere function to precede the dominant. This results in distortion in the original harmonic equilibrium, and the grouping of notes according to the triple meter is no more a prerequisite. How the notes should be actually played, grouped, and how the meter should be recognized, well, I shall leave that question open here, but we could probably say that in a way, the 10th and 11th variations, together with the 9th, provide a completely new dimension to the piece. Variations like this cannot be perceived as being derived from the theme if we do not go through the path through which the theme evolved into such a form. Just imagine the 11th variation being played right after the theme. You will hardly feel any connection between them. With this chaconne, the music follows a highly individual, extraordinary path, and as we have witnessed, an extraordinary outcome or divergence is always anticipated in very carefully planned ways. This means that if we fail to understand and reproduce Bach's plan, the piece may very easily fall apart, which rather often happens in the form of this chaconne with highly diverse, very rich content, lacking a sense of integrity. All right, I think I have presented enough material for discussion. You may agree or disagree with what I said. I'm glad if what I said presented some kind of an idea of how carefully Bach planned the evolution of the chaconne. At least up to the 19th century, the concept of theme and variations generally is to present a core that has a relatively easily recognizable character and derive different elements from it while maintaining the original character to some extent. With Bach chaconne, the composer uses his strong creative power to develop the theme into such overwhelmingly characteristic variations that are actually much more creative than many of the themes and variations written by his successors. And whether we can present Bach's highly creative work as an integrated unity, well, it hinges on whether we are aware of and can realize his plan. Thanks for watching.